The heart that sees. There are mornings that begin like any other, but carry within them a silent change, as if the universe were whispering that nothing will ever be the same again. For Lucy, that Tuesday in October began just like that. She always woke up early, not out of discipline, but because the silence of the empty house didn't let her sleep much. At 42, Lucy had learned to live with loneliness, but never truly embraced it. The coffee cup grew cold in her hands as she stared out the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood slowly awaken. Identical houses, well-kept gardens, cars leaving for work. Everything perfectly normal. Everything perfectly lonely. She worked as a librarian at the neighborhood school, a job she loved for its tranquility and the books that were her most faithful companions. That morning, Lucy put on her navy blue coat, grabbed her purse, and walked out the front door, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. The golden leaves covered the sidewalk with a crunchy carpet beneath her footsteps. She always walked the same route, 30 minutes to school, 30 minutes back. It was her way of meditating, of thinking, of existing without needing to explain anything to anyone. But that morning, something was different. As she turned the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue, Lucy heard it. A low, almost imperceptible sound, but it cut through the silence like a whispered plea. It was a moan, weak, trembling, desperate. She stopped. She looked around, trying to identify where the sound was coming from, and that's when she saw it. Beneath a parked car, partially hidden between the rear wheels, lay a dog. He was neither big nor small, perhaps 25 pounds of pure sadness and abandonment. His brown and white fur was dirty and matted, and his eyes, my God, his eyes seemed to hold all the pain in the world. Lucy knelt slowly, reaching out her hand carefully. The dog didn't flinch. He just stared at her with an intensity that made her heart ache. He was shaking, not just from the cold, but from fear, from hunger, from having been left behind by the very people who should have protected him. No one else was passing by at that moment. No one else had stopped. No one else had heard that silent moan. Only she. And without much thought, without calculating the consequences, Lucy removed the scarf from her neck and carefully wrapped it around the dog. He didn't resist. He just curled up tighter, as if he'd finally found something that could be safe. She scooped him up in her arms. He was lighter than he looked. Too light. His ribs were visible beneath his dirty fur, and when Lucy looked closer, she saw the torn collar still attached to his neck, a small, scratched metal tag dangling slightly. There was something written there, but it was hard to read. Numbers, maybe a name. She couldn't decipher it at the moment. All that mattered was that this fragile, frightened being needed help, and she wasn't going to turn away. Lucy forgot about work, forgot about the time, forgot about everything. She turned and walked back home with the dog nestled in her arms, her heart pounding faster than it had in years. What she didn't know, what she could never have imagined at that moment, was that someone was watching. From afar, in the shadows of the trees in the adjacent square, a man stopped walking and stood completely still, his eyes fixed on her and the dog. Her hands were shaking, her face was pale, and a single word escaped her lips in an incredulous whisper. Max, the life lived in silence. Lucy's house was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a living room with a beige sofa that had seen better days, and a kitchen where morning light streamed in through the window. It was the kind of place that could be happy, but had long since become accustomed to being merely functional. She'd been living alone for almost 5 years. Ever since her marriage ended, ever since James decided he needed to find himself in another city, with another person, in another life. Lucy didn't hold a grudge, or at least she told herself she didn't. He'd just learned that some people don't stay, and that's okay. But the loneliness still hurt. On cold nights, during silent breakfasts, on weekends without plans, It hurt softly, constantly, like a sad song playing softly in the depths of the soul. When she walked into the house with the dog in her arms, Lucy felt something strange. The house seemed different, less empty, as if that fragile, trembling presence had brought with it a promise that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to be so alone. She gently placed him on the living room rug. The dog flinched, but didn't try to run away. He just stood there, staring at her with those deep brown eyes that seemed to understand more than they should. Lucy ran to the kitchen and filled a bowl with water. When she set it down, the dog drank with desperate urgency, as if he hadn't had a drink in days. And he probably hadn't. She felt a lump in her throat. He didn't have any dog food at home. Why would he? But he opened the fridge and took out some leftover chicken from dinner. He shredded it with his hands, put it on another plate, and offered it to the dog. The dog ate slowly this time, almost delicately, as if he didn't want to appear too desperate. Lucy sat on the floor beside him, watching his every move. He was beautiful, despite the dirt. Brown fur on his back, white on his chest and paws. Floppy ears that moved slightly with every sound, and those eyes that seemed to hold stories she would never know. After he ate, the dog approached her, slowly, testing, and then, with a deep sigh, he laid his head in Lucy's lap. She felt tears burn in her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had trusted her like this, so long since she felt needed. The hours passed without her realizing it. Lucy called school to say she wouldn't be coming. She said she was sick, which wasn't a lie. She was sick with loneliness, and that dog was the medicine she didn't know she needed. She bathed him carefully in the tub, using his own shampoo. The water turned brown with dirt, but gradually his real fur appeared. He didn't complain, didn't try to jump out. He simply let himself be cared for, as if he'd finally found a safe haven. Once she'd dried him with soft towels, Lucy picked up the collar to examine it more closely. The metal tag was scratched and worn. There were numbers on it, an old phone number perhaps, and a name she could barely decipher. Max. So he had a name, he had a story. He had someone at some point. Lucy picked up her cell phone, thinking about calling the number. But it was so faded, some digits so illegible, that she wasn't sure she could. Besides, a part of her, a selfish part she didn't want to admit, was afraid of what would happen if she found the owner. What if it was someone who didn't want him anymore? What if it was someone who abandoned him on purpose? The thought made his stomach churn. Max curled up on the couch, finally relaxed, finally safe, and Lucy sat beside him, stroking his head tenderly. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel so empty. For the first time in years, she had someone waiting for her. Outside, the day went on. People came and went, caught up in their routines and worries. But inside that small house on Maple Street, something was shifting, something delicate and powerful at the same time. Lucy didn't know it yet, but that dog wasn't just an abandoned animal. He was a bridge, a connection to something bigger, deeper, more painful than she could ever imagine. And as she caressed Max, feeling his heart beat beneath her palm, somewhere not far away, a man sat alone in a house even emptier than hers, his hands shaking and his eyes fixed on an old photograph. A photograph of a dog. The same dog. When routine gains color, the first few days with Max transformed Lucy's life in ways she hadn't expected. They weren't huge changes, but rather small details that made all the difference. The way he'd wait for her at the door when she came home from school, the soft sound of his paws on the hardwood floor, his warmth beside her on the couch on cold nights. The loneliness was still there, but now I had company. And that changed everything. Lucy bought food, new bowls, a soft bed and some toys. She spent more than she should have, but she didn't care. Max deserved it. He deserved everything she could give after being left behind like that. She tried a few more times to decipher the number on the plaque. She spent hours with a magnifying glass, writing down the possibilities, but the digits were so worn, it was impossible to be certain. Part of her felt guilty for not trying harder. Another part, the part that woke up every morning with Max by her side, felt a quiet relief. Max was unlike any puppy she'd ever met. He wasn't effusive or excitable. He was calm, almost solemn, as if carrying an invisible weight. Sometimes I'd stand there, staring at the door, my ears pricked, as if waiting for someone who never arrived. At these times, Lucy would come closer and caress him slowly. He always rested his head against her hand, but his eyes remained distant, lost in some memory she couldn't reach. Her best friend Emma came to visit a week later. Emma was everything Lucy wasn't. Outgoing, talkative, always with a funny story to tell. They'd known each other since college, and Emma never judged her for the choices she made or the quiet life she led. When she saw Max, Emma immediately knelt down and held out her hand. He sniffed it carefully before accepting the caress. Emma smiled that wide smile of hers. "So you finally have a date. It's about time, Lucy." Lucy made coffee and they sat in the kitchen. Emma wasted no time. She asked about the dog, where it had come from, if Lucy had looked for its owner. And Lucy told her everything. The cold morning, the low whimper, the sad eyes, the illegible dog tag. Emma listened in silence, but Lucy knew that look. It was the look of someone who wanted to say something, but wasn't sure if they should. "What's up, Emma? Go ahead and talk." Emma stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Have you tried posting on social media, in neighborhood groups? Maybe someone's looking for him." Lucy felt her chest tighten. She knew Emma was right. She knew it was the right thing to do. But the thought of losing Max, of watching him walk out the door and never return, was unbearable. "I thought about it. But look at him, Emma. Look at the state he was in. If someone abandoned him like that, they don't deserve to have him back." Emma sighed. "I understand, dear. But what if it wasn't abandonment? What if he got lost? What if someone is desperately looking for him?" The words hung in the air like a gentle accusation. Lucy knew Emma was right, but she couldn't convince herself. Not yet. Not when Max finally brought light into her home. Later, when Emma left, Lucy sat on the couch with Max beside her. She pulled out her phone and opened the neighborhood group. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. All she had to do was type, "Dog found, brown and white fur," answers to the name Max. But he couldn't. He just couldn't. He put away his phone and hugged Max tightly. He let him, as he always did, but there was something different about him that night. A restlessness. He stood up suddenly and walked to the window, placing his front paws on the sill. Lucy walked over and looked out. The street was empty. Only the streetlights illuminated the sidewalk. Nothing unusual. But Max stood there, motionless, as if waiting for something, or by someone. Over the next few days, Lucy began to notice a pattern. Every afternoon around 5 o'clock, Max would become agitated. He'd go to the window, look out at the street, and sometimes give a few low barks. It wasn't fear. It was recognition, as if he sensed something she couldn't see. One afternoon, Lucy decided to investigate. When Max ran to the window again, she slipped out the front door and looked around. The street was quiet. A few children were playing up ahead. A car drove slowly by, and then she saw. Across the street, standing in the shade of a large oak tree, was a man. He was far away, but Lucy could make out his silhouette, tall, thin, with his hands in his pockets, and he was looking directly at her house. Lucy's heart raced. She took a step toward the sidewalk, but at that moment the man turned and began walking quickly in the opposite direction, disappearing around the bend in the street. Lucy stood there, confused and slightly scared. Who was that man? Why was he staring at her house, and why had he run away when she left? She went back inside, locked the door, and knelt beside Max. He was still restless, pacing in circles, sniffling by the door. "You know him, don't you? You feel he's nearby." Max looked at her with those deep eyes, and Lucy knew for sure this was no coincidence. This man had something to do with Max. Maybe he was his owner. Maybe he was someone who had abandoned him and now regretted it. Or maybe it was something else entirely. And for the first time since meeting Max, Lucy felt afraid, not of losing her dog, but of discovering a truth she might not be ready to face. When the heart needs answers, Lucy couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Max slept at her feet. The image of the man standing under the tree wouldn't leave her mind. Who was he? Why was he there? And why had he run away? In the morning, she made a decision. She could no longer pretend nothing was happening. She could no longer ignore the possibility that Max had a history, a life before her, and if someone was looking for him, she needed to know, but not out of obligation, out of love. Because truly loving sometimes means being willing to let go. After coffee, Lucy took Max's collar and examined the tag again, this time more carefully, more patiently. She wrote down every number she could make out, every possibility. There were at least 3 different combinations that might make sense. He took a deep breath and dialed the first number. It rang. It rang. It rang. No one answered. Voicemail disconnected. She tried the second. A woman answered, her voice irritated. Lucy quickly explained about the dog she'd found. The woman laughed. "I don't have a dog. It must be the wrong number." And she hung up. The third number took a while to ring. Lucy almost hung up when someone finally answered. It was a male voice, deep, tired, as if carrying the weight of the world. "Hello?" Lucy's heart raced. "Hello. I found a dog with this tag, this number. His name is Max." There was a long silence on the other end, so long that Lucy thought the line had dropped, but then she heard breathing, heavy, shaky. "Where did you find it?" The man's voice was broken. Lucy felt a shiver run down her spine. On Maple Street, near Oak Avenue. He was hiding under a car, very scared and thin. Another silence. Lucy heard something that sounded like a muffled sob. "It's him. Oh my God, it's him. I thought I would never..." Her voice broke completely. Lucy felt tears well up in her own eyes. "He's okay now. He's with me. He's safe. I need to see him. Please. I need..." The man couldn't finish his sentence. Lucy closed her eyes, feeling her heart break. Of course you can. When do you want to come?" "Now. Can I go now?" Lucy gave the address. The man thanked her in a choked voice and hung up. She stood there, holding the phone, feeling the world collapse around her. Max lay at her feet, looking at her with those eyes that knew too much. She knelt down and hugged the dog tightly. "Maybe it's time for you to come home, Max, to your real home." Max licked her face gently, and Lucy let the tears fall freely. She knew it would hurt. She'd known it since day one. But she never imagined it would hurt this much. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Lucy quickly wiped her face and went to the door. When she opened it, she saw the man standing under the tree. Up close, she could see his features better. He must have been around 50, with grey hair and deep, tired blue eyes. There was an old sadness in his face, but also a desperate anticipation. Before Lucy could say anything, Max ran between her legs. The dog stopped in the middle of the room, staring at the man. And then something happened. Max started crying. It wasn't a bark. It was a cry. A deep, painful wail that shattered Lucy's heart into 1,000 pieces. He ran toward the man, jumped, put his paws on his chest, and licked his face frantically. And the man fell to his knees on the ground, hugging the dog with a strength that seemed to make up for all the lost time. He cried. He cried like a child. He cried like someone who finally finds something they thought they'd lost forever. "Max, my boy, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Lucy stood in the doorway, her hands on her lips. trying to hold back her tears. That scene was one of the most beautiful and saddest she had ever seen. It was love, pure, true, devastating love. After several long minutes, the man finally regained control. He slowly stood up, still holding Max, and looked at Lucy with red, swollen eyes. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved him. You saved the only thing I had left." Lucy swallowed. "How did you lose him?" The man took a deep breath, as if the answer were a knife to the chest. "He wasn't lost. He was taken. My ex-wife. When we separated, she took Max. She said he was hers. I tried to fight him in court, but a dog isn't considered a child. I lost." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly haunted by the memory. "I didn't know where she lived. I didn't know how to find Max. I spent months searching. And then, 2 weeks ago, I was driving through this neighborhood on my way home from work, and I saw her. I saw her put him out on the street. She just put him on the sidewalk and walked away." His voice shook with anger and pain. "I tried to run after him, but he was too fast. And when I returned, Max was gone. I searched for days, every street, every corner. I thought he was dead, that I had lost him forever." Lucy felt her throat close up. "That's why you were across the street. You were looking for him." The man nodded. "I've been here every day, every afternoon, hoping, praying to see him in the window of some house. And then yesterday I saw him looking out your window, and I knew it was him. Why didn't you knock on the door?" He lowered his eyes. "Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, afraid you'd think I was the monster who abandoned him. I couldn't do it. I could only stand there watching, knowing he was alive and safe." Lucy felt the tears well up again. She looked at Max, nestled in the man's arms, and saw the truth. That dog loved that man, and that man loved that dog in a way that transcended everything. "What's your name?" "Derek." "My name is Derek." When the pieces start to fit together, Derek walked into Lucy's house with Max still in his arms, as if afraid to let go and have him disappear again. Lucy offered him coffee, and he accepted, sitting on the couch with the dog clinging to his side. Max kept his eyes on him, as if needing reassurance that this was real. Lucy brought the cups and sat in the chair opposite. There were so many questions on her mind, so many things that didn't make sense yet. She needed to understand. She needed to know the whole story. Derek held the cup in both hands, his eyes fixed on Max. He began speaking slowly, as if each word were a heavy stone he needed to lift. "Sarah and I were married for 15 years. We didn't have children. We tried, but it didn't happen. Max was our baby, our boy. We got him when he was just 2 months old. He grew up with us, slept in our bed, went everywhere with us." He paused, stroking Max's head. But things started to fall apart. The marriage became difficult. We fought a lot, about everything, about nothing. And one day, Sarah said she couldn't take it anymore. She wanted a divorce. Lucy listened silently, hearing the pain in his voice. I accepted. There was nothing I could do. We shared everything, the house, the furniture, the money. But when she got to Max, she said he was hers, that she'd picked him out of the pound, that he'd always been more attached to her. Derek closed his eyes, the pain clear on his face. I begged for us to share custody so I could see him sometimes, but she refused. She said I didn't deserve it, that I had ruined the marriage, that I didn't deserve anything. His voice broke. I tried to fight legally, but the lawyer told me that dogs are considered property, and since she had the adoption receipt in her name, Max was technically hers. I lost. I lost my marriage and my son. Lucy felt her heart sink. She reached out and lightly touched his arm. I'm so sorry, Derek. This is terrible. He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I didn't see him for 6 months. 6 months wondering if he was okay, if he missed me, if he was waiting for me at the door, thinking I'd come back. I nearly went crazy. Derek looked at Max with devastating tenderness. And then 2 weeks ago, fate gave me a chance. I was driving home from work, passing through this neighborhood I'd never been to before, and suddenly I saw her car. I recognized it instantly. I stopped a few feet behind and watched as she opened the door and deposited Max on the sidewalk. He just watched her. He didn't try to get back into the car. He just stood there with that confused look, and she left. She just left like he was trash. The anger in Derek's voice was palpable. I hurried out of the car, but by the time I arrived, she was already gone. And Max had panicked at the movement and ran. I called out to him, shouted his name, but he was too scared. He disappeared between the houses. Lucy felt tears wet her face. And you've been searching ever since, every day. Every hour I wasn't at work. I walked every street in this neighborhood. I put up posters. I posted in online groups. But no one had seen him. No one knew anything. Until yesterday I saw him at his window, and my heart almost stopped. He looked at Lucy with deep gratitude in his eyes. You don't know what you did for me. You don't know how desperate I was, how I thought I'd lost the only thing that still mattered in my life. Lucy wiped away her tears. I just did what anyone would do. He needed help. No, most people would have walked right past, ignored that moan. But you stopped. You listened. You saved him. And you saved me too. Max lifted her head and looked at Lucy. And in that moment, she understood. She hadn't just been the person who found an abandoned dog. She had been the bridge that reconnected two souls who needed each other to survive. Derek took a deep breath and looked at her seriously. Lucy, I need to ask you something. And you can say no. I'll understand. What is it? You took such good care of him. I see it. He's clean, well-fed, happy. You loved him when he needed it most. And I'll never forget that. Never. He took Max's hand, stroking it slowly. But I need to take him home. I need him with me. He's all I have left. Do you understand? Lucy felt her heart break, but she nodded. Of course I understand. He's yours. He's always been yours. I just took care of him until he found his way back. Derek looked at her with tearful eyes. Thank you. Thank you for understanding. But then something unexpected happened. Max got up from the couch, walked over to Lucy and placed his head in her lap. He looked at her with those deep eyes, then looked at Derek, and back at Lucy, as if he were saying something, as if he were asking for something. Derek watched the scene in silence, and Lucy saw something shift in his face, an understanding, a decision forming. When love finds a new path, Derek stared at Max, then at Lucy, and back again. Something was working in his mind, something he was trying to understand. The dog clearly loved them both. It wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Lucy, can I ask you a personal question? She nodded, still stroking Max's head. Of course, do you live alone? The question caught her off guard. I do. For 5 years. Derek hesitated before continuing. And before those days with Max, did you feel lonely? Lucy felt a lump in her throat. The question was simple, but the answer was too profound. She looked at her hands, at Max, and finally at Derek. Very. I felt so alone. He nodded slowly as if he understood perfectly. So did I. After Sarah took Max, my house was so empty that sometimes I couldn't even go inside. I'd sit in my car in the garage because I couldn't stand the silence. The two were silent for a moment, connected by their shared pain. Loneliness is a strange thing. You can be surrounded by people and still feel it. But with Max, it was different. He filled the empty spaces just by existing. Derek took a deep breath and looked Lucy straight in the eye. I have a proposal, and you might think it's crazy. You might say no. But I need to say it. Lucy felt her heart race. What is it? What if we shared custody? Max, Not officially, because there's no such thing for dogs, but between us. Some days with me, some days with you, so that neither of us is alone again." Lucy froze. The idea was absurd, it was inconvenient, it was complicated, but at the same time it made perfect sense. She looked at Max, who was now sitting between them, looking back and forth as if he perfectly understood what was being discussed. "Derek, you barely know me. How can you trust me like that?" He smiled for the first time, a sad but genuine smile. "Because you did something most people wouldn't. You stopped to hear a whimper. You picked up a dirty, scared dog and took him home. You cared for him without expecting anything in return. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Lucy felt tears well up again. But what if it doesn't work? What if it's too complicated? Derek leaned forward. "So we try again, in a different way, but at least we try, because look at him, Lucy. Look at Max. He doesn't want to choose. He wants both." And it was true. Max was looking at them with an expression that could only be described as hope, as if finally, after so much suffering, he could have a family again. Not the one he had before, but something new, something different, something his own. Lucy wiped away her tears and took a deep breath. "Okay, let's try." Derek's face lit up in a way that made him look years younger. "Seriously? Seriously? But we have to do this right, with rules, with organization, so as not to confuse Max." Derek agreed immediately. "Sure. We can make a schedule. I live 20 minutes away. It's not far. We can alternate weeks or days if you prefer." Lucy thought for a moment. "How about we start with 3 days each? See how he adapts." "Perfect. And we keep in touch. Messages, photos, so he knows that even when he's not with one, the other is still there." Lucy smiled, feeling something strange and warm grow in her chest. It wasn't just about Max. It was about not being alone. It was about having someone who understood, someone who also had a void that needed to be filled. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. Derek brought Max home on the first day, and Lucy felt the house empty again. But this time, it was different, because she knew he would come back, and because Derek sent pictures. Max sleeping on the couch, Max playing in the backyard, Max looking out the window as if waiting for something. And when Max returned 3 days later, Lucy greeted him with a tight hug. He was happy, his tail wagging, his eyes bright. And then Derek came in too, carrying Max's bed and some toys. He stayed for coffee, and they talked. About life, about the past, about how strange and wonderful it was that a dog could bring two completely different people together. Derek talked about his job as an engineer, about how he felt invisible most of the time. Lucy talked about the books she loved, about the children at the library who made her days better. And slowly, without realizing it, something was changing. It wasn't just Max who was being shared, it was the loneliness that was being shared. And when you share loneliness with someone, it transforms into something else. In company, in understanding, in something that was beginning to look a lot like hope. When Derek left that afternoon, Lucy stood at the door, watching. He waved before getting into the car, and she waved back. Max stood beside her, his tail still wagging. "I think we made a friend, Max." And for the first time in a long time, Lucy didn't feel alone, not even a little bit. When truth heals old wounds. 3 months had passed since Lucy and Derek began sharing custody of Max. What began as a practical arrangement had turned into something much bigger. They weren't just two people sharing a dog. They had become friends, real friends. Derek started spending more time at Lucy's house when he came to pick up or drop off Max. Sometimes they'd have dinner together. Other times they'd simply watch TV while Max slept between them on the couch. And slowly, unhurriedly, they began to share more than just the dog. They shared stories, fears, dreams they'd held onto for so long they'd almost forgotten they existed. One Friday night, Derek arrived earlier than usual. He carried a pizza box and a tired smile. Lucy opened the door and immediately noticed something different about him, something lighter. Did something good happen? Derek set the pizza down and took a deep breath. I saw Sarah today. It was the first time since the divorce. Lucy felt her heart tighten. How was it? It was strange, but necessary. She called me yesterday, said she needed to talk. I almost didn't go, but I thought I should. They sat on the couch as Max ran to greet Derek. He petted the dog before continuing. She apologized. She cried a lot. She said she had acted out of anger, out of hurt, and that abandoning Max was the worst thing she had ever done. She wanted to know if he was okay. And did you tell? Derek nodded. I told her everything. About you, about how happy Max was, about our arrangement, and you know what she said. Lucy shook her head curiously. She said she was happy, that I deserved to have him back, and that you seemed like exactly the kind of person Max needed. Lucy felt her eyes well up. Really? Derek smiled. She also said something else. She said that when we broke up, I was so focused on saving the marriage that I forgot to save myself, that I lost myself trying to be what she wanted, and that maybe losing Max was the push I needed to find my own path. He looked at Lucy with an intensity she'd never seen before, and she was right. Because it was in losing Max that I found you, and it was in finding you that I found myself again. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Lucy didn't know what to say. She felt something growing inside her, something she was afraid to name because it seemed too big, too important. Derek moved a little closer. Lucy, can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you ever ask me if I wanted to stay? Not just to pick up Max, but to actually stay. Dinner together, watch movies, share our lives. Lucy lowered her eyes. Because I was afraid of feeling things you didn't, afraid of ruining what we had built. Derek gently took her hand. What if I told you I'm feeling these things too? That every time I leave I don't want to go? That this house with you and Max has become more of a home than my own? Lucy looked up and saw the same vulnerability she felt there. I feel it too. He smiled, and it was the most genuine smile Lucy had ever seen. So maybe we don't have to share anymore. Maybe we can just be together. Lucy felt her heart explode in a way she hadn't felt in years. Derek leaned in and kissed her softly, carefully, as if she was something precious he was afraid to break. When they parted, Max was sitting at their feet, his tail wagging furiously, as if everything was finally right in his world. Derek laughed and patted the dog's head. I think he approved. Lucy laughed too, wiping away tears of happiness. I guess this was his plan all along, and maybe it was. Maybe Max always knew that those two lonely souls needed each other, that he was just the bridge that would lead them to find each other. Over the next few months, Derek slowly moved his things into Lucy's house. First some clothes, then books, then furniture, until one day it simply didn't make sense to maintain two homes anymore. They were married on a sunny spring day in a small backyard ceremony. Emma was the maid of honor, and Max was the ring-bearer, walking proudly down the aisle with the rings attached to his collar. When the judge declared them husband and wife, Lucy looked at Derek and saw not only the man she loved, but the man who'd been able to transform pain into love, abandonment into a new beginning, loneliness into family, and all because one cold morning she stopped to hear a moan that would change everything, where love finds its true home. 2 years had passed since that cold October morning. The house on Maple Street was no longer silent. It was full of life, laughter, and love. Lucy woke every morning with Derek by her side, and Max sleeping at the foot of the bed. The loneliness that once filled every corner of that house had been replaced by something much greater, by belonging, by family. Derek still took Max for walks every afternoon, and they always passed the corner where it all began, where an abandoned dog became the bridge between two broken hearts. Lucy sometimes wondered what her life would have been like if she had simply driven past that morning, if she hadn't heard that low moan, if she hadn't stopped. But it stopped, and that made all the difference, because sometimes saving someone is also saving yourself. Sometimes love arrives when we least expect it, hidden under an old car, shivering with cold, and fear just waiting for someone who cares enough to look. Max lay in the sun in the garden, old and happy, surrounded by the two people he loved most in the world. And if dogs could smile, he would be smiling, because finally, after all, he was home, and so were they. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever encountered someone or something that completely changed your life when you least expected it? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to read it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends, because stories of love, hope, and new beginnings need to be told. Always.